All right. Oh, wow. I do need to move stuff around. Thank you, OBS 28. Hang on a second. What's going on, everybody? Welcome. It is Tuesday night. It is the NLG show. We are live, and we've got a great night for you. Don't mind me as I'm fidgeting with the screen a little bit. It's I upgraded to OBS 28, and lo and behold, while it's got some really nice stuff that it did, looks like it messed with my dimensions just a little bit. So sorry about that, folks. But welcome. What a great night we've got in store for you. We have, as I've aptly named it, it's Return of the Myke. We have a great guest tonight. Our great friend, someone he's been on before. We talk, a lot on Twitter. Always with the great. Always with the great retro tweets, and of course, the master of what I've pretty much have dubbed the master of the collection. He is Mika, head of Digital Eclipse. How are you, Myke? Welcome back. That first show was 2 years ago. It was just before the pandemic. It was 2 weeks after we had Tommy Tallarico on. We had you on. It's been 2 years. Yes. You too. Well, it is past, present, and future. So, and I have been on an Atari VCS kick lately, an unhealthy one, because I've done things on that I'm not sure most people want to do on it. So, I have I'm actually it's my emulation box of all things. So, hang on. Brian says, oh, hold on. Brian says he can't hear you. He should be able to hear you. Yeah, he should be able to hear. I don't know if it's just him. Yes, I think so. At least it says it's guys, if I go live, will you all join? I think they could hear you. I think Brian's just messing with us. Oh wait, Qeorge says not hearing him either. Wait. Yeah, you sound good. You sound good here. And can you guys hear Chris and Peter? That's the question. Because if you hear them, you can hear Myke. Oh, he said I can only hear me. All right, hang on a second. I'm telling you, if it's, oh, you got to be kidding me. All right, hang on. This is ridiculousness. Give me a second. Yeah, but that's really bizarre because it does say enable audio. All right, all that looks good. And I definitely see. All right, hold it. Let me go here. Oh, wait a minute. Let's do this. Let's see. Yeah. All right. How about now? See? Well, now it's except now it's now it's echoing. Yeah, now it's echoing. All right, hang on. Tracks. What in the heck? This is ridiculousness. All right, let me log in and let me check it out from my phone.
This is the OBS episode.
Yeah, right? Oh my god. I updated to 28 and everything was working. I had everything going. And you guys in the audio mixer, everything in the audio mixer is looking like you guys talk and the audio mixer is going up. So
okay. I wonder if we still have an echo.
Oh no, I can hear you now. No, you're.
Is the echo gone?
Yeah, I think the echo might be gone.
Yeah. No, everybody. I can hear everybody through the. I
Good
can hear
now,
you
then.
guys. So I don't know what's going on with them, but I can hear you, and I just pulled it up on my phone, and I can hear you guys just fine.
All right, so
So
I think we're all good.
I think we're all good.
That's
It's
how
that-
you kick off a show.
It's
Yeah.
that, or they're messing with me, which is not uncommon.
That would
These
be
are my
amazing.
friends. So, and look,
happened
I
before.
even went with a nice German wine tonight because for the special occasion. So stop messing with me, folks. So Hasslehoff said if you tried turning it off and on. Thank you. That's excellent. So
Mike,
Myke,
a
how-
little break. A quick shout out to Michael Garvey for the
Oh.
$10 super chat. He says, from one Myke to the two Mikes, Chris and Peter.
all
Thank
right,
you, Mike.
they can all
Thank
hear
you, Myke.
everybody now.
The
So-
Mike Knight.
Do I hear echo? No, just kidding.
No, stop. Stop. No. So, all right, so let's try this again. Myke, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Not like I said that before, but if I were to recap, like I said, like I thought your intro was amazing.
Thank
The whole
you.
Amiga thing to the modern thing. I like that you ended on Yars. It's all good. It's been we talked a little bit about it's been 2 years since
2
I've been on,
years.
so that's kind of ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
Feels
and
like
that's
10, but
and-
not in a negative way.
right.
Yeah.
No, it is ridiculous, and we will make sure that doesn't happen again.
Well, the dog years, internet years, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, and I mean, we are on our 295th show. So I was actually going back while now that we're talking about it, I'm like, well, what numbered show was Myke on last? And I remember it was pre-pandemic. I do remember that. And it was, I'll tell you exactly when it was. It was, of course, I should probably type your whole name in because I've got a whole bunch of Myke on the couch videos. Hold on.
Did we just lose his microphone?
I can't lose. Mike Garvey says Mike Malls can't work technology. You were the last time you were on was episode 186. So it has been 100 and some odd,
That's
100
nuts.
and some odd episodes since you've been on.
Well, you're coming on 300. That's a huge milestone for these sorts of things, right? So it's like,
It
what,
is.
what do you have a plan for what 300th show premise is going to be?
Ooh,
Didn't really.
not
I mean, we
really.
want to have a big one though.
It all
It'll be a big
depends on what's
300
going
episode
on.
bash.
That's true. We just have every guest who's ever been on. Let's see if I can pull that one
we'll do a
off.
24-hour show.
Mhm. Make everybody play Bubsy.
Oh, why are you trying to drive my subscribers away? Oh my goodness. So how have you been? How's things been over there?
It's been good. I mean, we just moved into a new office, so there's been a lot of construction going on. Like, this is actually perfect timing for the show because the workers just stopped probably about 20 minutes ago. But it's been hammering and everything like that, and that's been good. We've got a lot of people coming back to the office now, which is speeding things up a bit. We've got
Nice.
a lot of projects in the pipe. Like, we've got some that you've heard of that about the Atari 50th, and Turtles just shipped.
Mhm.
But we've got probably 5 or 6 other kind of cool projects kicking around too. So it's been busy.
And this is a great place to break news. Just saying. Anything that you want to tell us, and actually, I would be remiss if we just didn't ask, is there a ship date for IDARB 2 yet?
Oh gosh, I feel so horrible about IDARB 2 because it's one of those things I poke at every so often, but we've got so many other things going on.
Sure.
But the one thing that I like about, if I were to give a little bit of info about it, is like we've been spending a lot of time on the network model for it because I want it to be something that's really simple, but has a lot of layers to it. So like drop in, drop out, tournaments, spectating, the like really, I mean, low lag, like perception wise, like zero latency type gameplay. That's not just rollback. It's not just traditional network prediction models. It's kind of a hybrid of all that stuff. So it's been a lot of testing, trying to get something that just feels like you're not online anymore. And that's been what's really holding it up for me is we're just trying to perfect that. We just want it to be something that like when you get into a game, it isn't it's not going to be mired by a lot of networking issues that you see in a lot of like classic style games or a lot of action games. Because when you think about it, stuff like Call of Duty and all these things, like they're really great. A first-person shooter is great for online because you can really mask a lot of latency and lag issues with kind of the way the game's built. But when you're doing a game where everything's on screen, that becomes a little bit more challenging. And so that's been the thing I've been trying to solve with that one for so long, and on top of having so many other things to do. So I don't want to give a date, because if I give a date, I'm going to fail it miserably. But just everybody should know, like I do not stop on that one. I keep poking around at that one and making progress here and there, but it's in a decent place right now.
That is great. I mean, I was kind of being half kidding, but I'm glad that you're still working on it. And look, let's be honest. If you gave a date and you missed the date, everybody's missing. This is nothing. You're not breaking any norms here at this point. I don't know if there's a game right now that is shipping on time. So we're actually just glad we had the TMNT collection to play. No.
Oh, I know. Like that's a miracle that one got done too. The pandemic did hit us pretty hard, but everybody kind of just trudged through it all, and that one came together, and we hit the date ish, and same with like Atari 50th. We're gonna make that one out too. So I think we're catching up.
So when is the Atari 50 coming out?
Yeah.
Is it coming out for PC and Switch first?
No, it'll be on everything. It'll be everything simultaneously, and it should be. I don't know if it's been announced or whatnot or whatever, but it'll be before the holidays for sure.
Okay.
Nice.
Right now the site just says the Atari site says Q4.
Yeah, it's doing fine. It's tracking well.
Excellent.
But if they haven't announced it, I can't announce it, which I wish.
Sure
I
you
could.
can. Nobody's watching.
I was trying to get you to.
Right? Everybody
I get so
in the
much trouble
chat.
because,
Just...
you're lucky I'm not drinking right now. I've got stuff behind me I should be drinking, but that would loosen me up.
That's okay. I'm drinking enough for you. No, and I know that, and it's if I didn't ask, then people would say, "Why didn't you ask him?" Because I know he's not going to tell us. So
But at least it's not far out. It's not like
right.
It's not
holiday 2023, and then sorry,
Right.
we're slipping a little, and
Yeah, no, we're tracking well now, so that one's gonna be good. I think everybody will be happy when it comes out, or what the time is.
I'm gonna be happy with the action. I'm gonna be happy with what's in the collection. I don't even know where to start, and that's funny because I don't even know where to start. Do I start there? Do we start with Turtles? I kind of started showing Turtles on the screen because Chris and I were.
Start with Turtles because you already have it on screen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before that,
yeah.
Chris, Peter, how are you guys doing? How was your weekend?
Weekend was busy. So it's soccer in full swing. I'm with my daughter, so she has like 2 games each weekend, and I'm busy and swimming, and yeah.
Being a dad is tough. There's just so much going on.
It's crazy. It's like, can't wait for the work week so I can relax.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and on top of which, it had stuff going on over the weekend, and then Sunday night starts Rosh Hashanah, so I'm in temple yesterday, Sunday night and Monday, and I get gigs this weekend, and my son's trying to finish off his Eagle Scout stuff, and good grief.
Trying to hear much from you over the weekend.
Yeah, well, it's been busy.
Yeah.
So
I only have 1 kid. You have 3, so you're like 3 times as busy.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm glad my wife is a good partner in Ubering the children around to everywhere. So, like, what do your kids get into?
They're both cross country, and
Wow.
My son's in high school, my daughter's still in middle school, and so they do a bit of that. But I think they would not be into anything if we would let them be lazy. So we're just like, you have to do something.
Yeah.
And so that's what they chose. But for a while it was soccer, and both of them were soccer, and then now it's cross country.
That in and of
It's
itself
like
is
either be lazy or go do some long run and distance.
Yeah, if they could just do whatever they wanted, they'd just be
Yeah.
playing games all day, and that would be
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
like me,
yeah.
I'm a terrible role model as a parent.
Yeah, because you have nothing going on, like nothing at all. So, anyway, I'm going to open up a quick notepad, and if people have, good questions that they want to ask,
Yeah, collect the
I'll
questions,
collect
yeah.
questions.
Good idea.
And Wasabiat has one that I'll ask when we start talking about Atari. But yeah, so if I miss a question, I'll try to scroll back to it. But the other thing too is Mike's a good friend of ours, and sometimes it comes out and just chat, just catch up. And we talk to him all the time on Twitter, so it's not like we don't know him. So, oh my goodness. So, Turtles. So, did Konami? So let me ask you this, because it's not just the Turtles collection, and this is what I found fascinating is all the collections that you guys have done. Like, you're becoming kind of the foremost experts on, and you say it on your site, the preservation piece, right? The preservation of classic games. And, I will tell you that I missed out on playing the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles NES game. And at first I was like, wow, I can't believe I missed out on this. And the farther I got into it, I'm like, wow, I can believe I missed out on this because it's a hard game. But between like the Disney Classic Collection where you did the Lion King and Aladdin, which was awesome, this collection, the Blizzard collection, do the publishers, has it gotten to a point where they just come to you for these and just go, Myke, Steven, we need you to do a collection for us?
I that happens to a certain degree, but honestly, I think a lot of people are still unaware of what we do. The Turtles has changed that a bit because it's sitting in the charts next to some AAA games right now, which is phenomenal. We're very lucky for that. But like that's definitely got a lot of people's attention. But before that, it was more or less like a word of mouth thing. If somebody was like looking at their back catalog, there's usually somebody that's like, hey, you should talk to those guys at Digital Eclipse. Is what they do, is what their like focus is and everything. That was the case with like Blizzard. That was the case with some of the Disney stuff. And we've also got a long history with a lot of these companies. Like we go way back with Disney. We go way back with companies like Microsoft and those sorts. And like, so we end up when this comes up internally, we do end up having some decent conversations. Now all the time. I think there's a whole business kind of rationale that goes into a lot of this, because they'll look at their back catalog and they won't want to spend a lot of money on it because they don't understand what the return can be. And that's where we start evolving what we do over time here, because if we just put out Turtles games as is, just like an emulation collection, like that doesn't really, I'd say that doesn't really give you the biggest value proposition. But if we put out Turtles with so much context around it that fans of the games feel like they're getting even more than just the games, to the point that ideally people would be going after a game like this for mostly that rather than just the games, because like people can find ways to play these games outside of commercial means and all these other things, but like if we give them a reason to come in and play these games when we do them, that's us winning this. And like our main thesis is basically we want to give something that helps people appreciate the art of these games. So if we have to modernize them a bit and put a lot of quality of life things around it, like rewind and the watch modes and all that sort of stuff, or we add things like Rumble and online and everything else too, that's great. But also adding in things where people can just go really deep into the lore of the creation of these games, to the context of the era and all that sort of thing. I think that really helps build appreciation for these games too. And so that's something we're striving with every collection we do now. And I hesitate to even use the word collection anymore. We often refer to them as more like celebrations or whatever, but we haven't found the word yet. We just want to go deeper and deeper into that, and that's why after Turtles we have the Atari 50th, and we've kind of flipped the script a bit, where when you enter Atari 50th, it goes straight into the storyline of Atari rather than just a big list of games. So now you go into the history of Atari and you start exploring the history, and then you can always access a game list, but first and foremost is the story of Atari over 50 years.
That's cool. And
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
did
Yeah, I was really surprised when Myke streamed the Cowabunga, and he started showing how you had the Nintendo versions, the Genesis, and then go into the history of each game, and then you see the box art and the manual, that we don't get anymore nowadays,
Yeah.
or the instructions, and the original form, and look, if it was just in black and white or whatever. I love that. That's great, because I missed out on a lot of that stuff. I only had a Nintendo NES and Super NES, so to see the other versions and what they came with, that's it's great. I mean, for a lot of us old school gamers and some of the new gamers that can see some of that, it's like a little museum, a digital museum that y'all put together.
Yeah, and that's what we're really striving to do that more often, because I just recently I bought my daughter one of those little soup box record players, and she was like, I want a record player, and it's like, really?
Yeah.
Why would you like what? But then now she sits in her room and listens to these albums and looks through the liner notes and everything like that. And even this generation is really into the idea of slowing everything down and just like reading about and like being all consumed with the ephemera around all these things, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And so like looking at the boxes and these sorts of things, like we want to go even further and present these boxes in 3D and let you look at things the way you would look at them when you were younger and all stuff. So we've got a lot of plans for this, as well as for people who are really into game design or see a career potentially in going on that path. That's why we supply things like game design documents, and we've translated everything, of course, for Turtles and all that, which is phenomenal. And honestly, like Konami has been an incredible partner in all this, because our producer over there, Charles Murakami, just totally, like, he came to us, he knew what we do, like what we're doing and what we're striving to do, and he just believed in all of that and pushed us even further as we went through it, which was phenomenal, because we're used to just trying to get other people and our publishing partners to just understand what we're doing. Charles understood from the get-go. I was like, let's push it as far as we can go. And so he was a key member of the team and helping us achieve this goal for this.
Yeah, and they did a good job with the Contra and the Castlevania.
Yeah.
So.
And the cool thing is that, when you look back at some of this, right? For some of us that are, in the four of us are pretty much all in the same age range, right? So, this harkens back to an era where, Chris and Peter have heard me not complain, but sort of I've got a bit more complacent on modern gaming, and that, you can buy a game and half the size of the game is day one patch, or something's wrong, and you can patch it, so you just throw it out there, and games lack content at the beginning, and they have to build up over time. You didn't have that back here. When you bought when you bought these games, this is what you got, for better or for worse. And the companies had to make sure this stuff worked, and it had to make sure that it was as high a quality as it could be before they released it. And it's just I think it's a lost art to make a game like this, these days. And it's why I was so drawn to this collection, because number one, it had Hyperstone Heist in it, which, as a Sega kid, was my favorite, Turtles game outside of the arcade game. But for going back and being able to play the original NES game, to see how far, Konami, once they put their real label on it. And I know, the story of Ultra Games, but, to see what they did with the NES hardware for the Manhattan Project. I mean, this was back then groundbreaking stuff. So you guys bringing it into a new generation is great, but to us old guys, I mean, this is nostalgia, as they say. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug, and this hit it. Chris and I, we could have played this all night. We could have run this all night.
And I played this online. We're not, of course, back in the day, we had to be on the same couch to play these games. But to be able to do this online and on the modern console with modern controls, the old, button smash back in the day, great. It was great, smooth. Like I noticed a difference when we went from the NES version, then we went to the Genesis one, and I noticed a difference between the controls between them. So all that was great.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge because a lot of these games are definitely not designed for being online.
Yeah.
So that's one thing we're working on right now is like you can only test online so much with QA groups and all that stuff, but once it goes live, that's when the real test happens, and it can either go. Usually, it's one of two ways: extremely horrible or really great. It's hardly ever in the middle. This one kind of came out in the middle because like 4-player was having some challenges because you're trying to do a common denominator build for all platforms. And so we've got some feedback now from from people playing online. So we're going to be doing some revs to help that out. But like every game we do, we try to make it better and better and better. And in this case, these games just play so well. And especially if you're playing with your friends, like where the online breaks down, of course, is like when we go to like random matches, and you could have somebody across the country or whatever that brings everybody down. The style of networking it is. But we're trying to fix all that.
That did happen to us.
That did happen to us. We were playing Turtles in Time, and everything was great. And I accidentally left the party open or left the game open. Somebody popped in, and it went to a. It was weird. It was almost like it started frame skipping, and it was just really choppy. And then once he left, everything came back once he left. But when it was
that's kind of the problem with the networking model we're using. It's rollback netcode, but if there's not many people out there collectively playing at the same time, you might be matched up with somebody really far away now. And so some of the stuff we have to do is like, let's try to limit the range of people, let's test their network connection if we can beforehand. We have limits on that. Or at least show who's got the bad connection, all these things. So as we rev stuff, we're going to keep adding more and more of these things as we go.
Excellent.
Well, still need to pick it up. Sorry.
Oh no, yeah. So I told you, grab it. We've got, and then the three of us could play. Actually, the four of us. We haven't yet to play with Myke. The four of us could get in here and play some of the arcade. And it was great too about this about having like the different console versions is, I didn't have a Super Nintendo. So for me, going back and playing Turtles in Time on the SNES, and for Chris, this was the first time we had a chance to play. His first time he had a chance to play Hyperstone Heist.
Yeah.
And so, it's great to have these for those of us who also didn't play the originals. With the online, what was the rationale for what was and wasn't online? Because Hyperstone Heist is the Tournament Fighters was on I think the SNES version, and then the two arcades, but not any of the others. Was there a rationale to picking which ones could be online?
There definitely was. There's a lot of conversations with Konami. When we were building this, there's only so much budget you have when you're building it, and there's like for each game it takes so much time. So there's a lot of, we knew we could only do so many. So it was a bit of a back and forth on which ones to include. You're not going to satisfy everybody. But I don't remember exactly what the rationale was, but there was a lot of thought put into it. I know a lot of people want more of these games online, and that'd be great. So anything's possible going forward here, and the collection's been doing really good. So we'll see what we can do going forward.
So there's a possibility of adding some new online modes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's really up to Konami, and they've been great about wanting to like make things, to satisfy fans of the series and everything like that. And I think they're really surprised, not really surprised, but like pleasantly surprised by the reception the game's had. So we'll see what comes out of that.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure I don't think there were any other. This is the complete set, right? I mean, I don't remember there being any other real Turtles games out there.
There's the later console games that like a lot of people have been asking about, but we really focused on this era, and that definitely would have added a lot more work there. But like I know a lot of people are asking Konami about the later console games, but then Ubisoft started doing some games, and it starts to get a little murkier, and it's probably harder for Konami to pursue some of that stuff.
Yeah, I don't know who has what licensing anymore.
Yeah. Honestly,
you're
that's
right,
the hardest thing with what we do is like tracking down who owns what, because we can't ship anything with any sort of ambiguous understanding of that. We have to have people show us receipts, and that's probably half the job.
Oh, sure. Let's see.
Yeah, you don't want to get no surprises after it's out.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, we got a mass hole in the chat.
Oh yeah, we do. Sorry I haven't said hi to everybody in the chat. Man, it's the chat's rocking today. Which is always good when Mike's in town, because there's a lot of people that are, when we stream this, I've streamed this a couple of times now. So I did some solo runs. I think the one that Chris and I did on Friday was the third stream for this game. And I mean, I'm really enjoying this collection. And we have to go back and do it again, because Hyperstone Heist is the one game we didn't beat. So we beat the arcade because, of course, you could just keep popping quarters into it. So I think we were tallying at one point that we had each put like $10 worth of quarters into to beat it. But Hyperstone Heist doesn't let you do that, so.
Yeah, we were like joking around, like hopefully investors don't get any ideas, and like, look how many times they have to put quarters in these things, because back in the day, they were making money out the arcade, but nowadays they can say, all right, at the end of the night, charge your card how many times you.
Michael Garvey joked about the pachinko machine, but like honestly, when we look at all this stuff, we go through all that. We're like, I wonder if we can get a pachinko machine. What if we put a physics simulation together and do that? Or
that would be great.
I know we always think about that stuff, and we ask. And the other question too about the later consoles and how that might be an issue for emulating on Switch, which was screw watermarks. That case, like most cases like that, the source code is still available. So ideally what we do there is we just port it, so there wouldn't be any major overhead like emulation has to kind of deal with that. And ideally, if the games had an online mode, porting that would make it even easier, because there's a lot of effort put into that too already. That's what we did on it was the old Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD remix back in the day. We borrowed a bit of code from like the Dreamcast, got that up and running, and then reworked it from there. But I'm trying to if I remember that correctly. But that's kind of the approach it would take, rather than emulation of like a PS2 on a Switch, which would be awful.
Oh God, yes. No, but you guys have also been doing, and I'm Qeorge was asking about the Game Boy games, so I'm just really quickly showing what the Game Boy games look like in that era. And admittedly, I would say that the first Turtles game, when it was under the Ultra Games label, was decent, but of course, when Konami, I guess, started really putting their foot behind it, get it? The game quality really kicked up, especially on the Game Boy. But as you can see, Qeorge, they were in black and white. So, was there ever a thought on the Game Boy games to try to put them in that green color?
Yeah, I mean, we're putting thought into that right now. So whether that's something we can do for this or not, like that's another open question. But it's totally possible. And in this case, like a lot of the stuff that didn't quite get out there at launch was things that were just up against the schedule and trying to get us out there. There's so many more logistics that you kind of weigh everything against, where there's like things you want to do, but you're like, well, if we don't get out now, that means we're not going to have, by the time a patch that we'll obviously need, most games do now, just part of the process, like that would be scheduled later. You have to schedule around things. So it was just one of those things where we rushed to get to the date we needed to hit. And then from here, we're thinking about stuff that we can do with the package. And one of those things that we'd love to do is like pallets.
That would be neat, to be able to switch that out. I mean, you know, being able to add things to the game, that always fascinates me. It always has, because, you know, you take an existing game which already is high quality, and then just be able to go back and you know, take the time to add stuff while you're working on, you know, the other things that you can't tell us about right now, you know. Hint, hint.
Well, that was like the fun of the Blizzard arcade collection, because I love rock and roll racing, and the opportunity came up to where we could do something with that. And so I wanted to finally have a 4-player mode in the game rather than just 2-player. So we added that in. We added all the tracks from the Sega Genesis into the Super Nintendo version. And so it kind of made the ultimate version of rock and roll racing. We're putting the best of every version into one. That was really amazing. And then we didn't stop there. We're like, oh, what if we could get Larry Huffman, who did the voice, to come in and do more lines? So Larry Huffman, I think he was in his late 70s by the time we asked him, was up for it. And like his voice still sounded great, and he re-recorded everything. So we were like, okay, well, if we're going to get that, can we license the real songs? And can we put those in? And so we managed to get most of the real songs that were in there. I think Ozzy was just the only one that didn't want Paranoid in there, or whatever it was. And so we're like, oh, we almost got them all. But then we added a couple more tracks. And so doing all that stuff was really fun, because for me, being a fan of the game, I loved dissecting the game and going through and hacking that ROM to do all this. And by the end of it, I felt like I could do anything with that game. Like I wanted to add more levels. Just the clock ran out.
Oh, wow. So, and this is something I know, you know, when we switch over to the 50th collection, I am going to talk to you about the way that you guys are able to write these emulators. Because if I remember correctly, you guys write these yourselves, right?
We write, it's a little bit of everything, because like if there's somebody who's done something out there that's better than what we have, we'd rather use that. So we license some emulators from the emulation community. Like there's people who've been doing emulators for a long time. It's like we could sit down and go 20 years like they did, try to, or maybe less or whatever, but like otherwise these guys have been doing it for so long, and they've been doing a thankless job, like doing this for like the emulation community that sometimes can be pretty raw. And so we usually, if somebody's done a good job, we'll go out to them first to be like, hey, is there a chance we could license this? We'll pay you, we'll do whatever, because we'd rather just use that and give them the credit. But we do write, I'd say we write probably half of the emulators we use too. So
that's awesome.
It's a little, or maybe a little bit less than half at this point, but we try to figure out what's best for the project.
Let me scroll forward. So you guys see for just from a game standpoint. So this was the original Turtles, and then this was the second one. And it's funny how you could see the quality. I don't know if you can hear it or not. Let me see if I can.
Ghostbusters?
I think this I do have to
do that intro.
Yep. It's amazing that there we go. It's amazing that they were able to get this into the Game Boy.
Heroes in a half shell, Turtle Power. All right.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. You get my commentary too. Sorry. like who the hell is that?
Yeah.
It was me while I was streaming this.
Digital Eclipse are gonna copyright strike. You know?
That's right. But this is and it's very cool that you also have. I mean, not many, and I'm not. You guys do it right, where there's not many people who would maybe go after that, if and give people credit and pay them for their emulation. So, And there, look, the emulation scene out there is a lot more impressive than it was.
Absolutely.
I will tell you that with the exception of PS2 stuff, which is for whatever reason, it's so hard to emulate. My go-to has been RetroArch.
Yeah.
What they've been able to do with those cores has been amazing. Especially, I live off. The cool thing is, I use it to keep my Sega CDs from disc rotting. So, so I've basically taken my whole Sega CD collection, which is sitting over on my shelf, and I emulate it so that I don't have to keep worrying about putting the disc in and stuff. I've had a couple of Saturn games that, I still run all my Saturn and Dreamcast stuff on actual hardware, and I've had a couple of discs that have freaked me out that stopped working temporarily. And one of them was Panzer Dragoon, and that is not cheap, that game.
No.
That's
the thing. It's like emulation is fantastic. The emulation community is phenomenal. We like, there are heroes. Like, they're saving games every day. Like, a lot of this stuff that that we have access to now is thankfully because people have kept these systems alive one way or another. Like, how else are you gonna really play a TI 99 4A or any of these like esoteric platforms, an X68000, right? Like, these are really challenging platforms, and like things like the Mr. FPGA project or MAME or RetroArch, ultimately on every platform. These are fantastic things that we have, and what a time to be alive, right? Because like you pretty much have a gigantic index of the history of video games, and the only thing that like we do that's different from any of that stuff is like we're trying to be more of the documentary side of that, like and that context we talked about earlier. Like, we want to not only celebrate these games in a way that like our favorite emulators do and everything like that, but we want to also add those additional layers, like do documentaries, do interviews, do all this other stuff, replicating everything else. And like, if I could simulate walking into Toys R Us and looking at those VidPro cards that you flipped up and access things that way, I would do it in a heartbeat, because that's the kind of context I want to kind of surround these things with.
Well, but the other piece of it too is, we all know the gray area that resides within. What is, nothing is really public domain, right? So you have to, the emulation scene is great, but you have to be careful inside of it. So the collections allow people to play these games. And look, this was a very reasonably priced, considering what the games would actually go for if you had to go out and get them from a store. This is a very reasonably priced collection, and it does allow people to get these without fear of that gray area.
Yeah, that's what I can say, that there's a lot of gamers that don't understand the whole emulation or buying the RetroArch machines or whatever, or even going and buying the old systems and trying to get them to work.
Yeah.
And what you guys are doing is be able to bring that and put it in a collection that brings it out to everybody who can simply play it on their system that they're already playing all the modern games on. So
yeah, that's definitely a thing, because like there's a lot of people who just don't even want to be bothered with how do you install an emulator, or what do you how do you find ROMs or any of this stuff, or how do you rip your ROMs, how do you play your CDs, all that kind of stuff. And this just really simplifies that for a lot of people. And I think with Turtles, what's really good about this is it's really educated people on what can be done with these games. And again, we try to go even further. It's like a lot of emulators that are out there really preserve what those games were and that sort of thing. But what we want to do is like take these a little bit further, do a lot of quality of life things as well. You can play it exactly as they were, but also try to do things that make it even easier to play. And that includes things like maybe controller reworking. Like there's games that we've done where the game is just easier if it's a twin stick versus like a rotary and try to simulate rotary with like left trigger and right trigger and all that stuff. It just complicates the game. So we always remind ourselves, like, what was the intent of the original designers? How did they want people to engage and interact with their game? And so that often means we have to go through and rethink a lot of stuff on how controls work. And if we do our job right, We're doing a lot of this on Atari 50th, for instance, because there's a lot of spinner games, a lot of paddle games, a lot of trackball games. If we do our job right, that means people are playing these games. They're not thinking about how this doesn't play as well as having a trackball and that sort of thing.
Ah, the spinner stick.
I think that's why Myke wants to play the Atari 50th on the VCS, right, Myke?
It actually is. So, and I know, I know, Mike, you popped into our chat while we were talking about it, and I think you heard me say that. The one thing that, I like about the VCS is that they tried to do something a little different. They packed that Onyx bundle, packed a controller that's got a spinner, and it works. It actually works, and I did an entire video on that controller and testing it out with Tempest, not just like Tempest 4000, which phenomenal game, but the original Tempest arcade, which it worked with. The only thing it didn't work with was the 2600 version for some bizarre reason. But then again, the 2600 version of Tempest is not exactly Tempest. I'm not sure what in the world that game is, but it's horrifically different. But
it's an unfinished prototype. That's one that was never beyond like probably a few weeks or maybe not even that. So
that must be it. You know what? I'm glad you said that because I need to go back and I need to look at that. It's in the Atari VCS vault that it came with, and I didn't even realize that might not be a finished game. I mean,
that's the context we're talking about, right? So it's like when a lot of collections will have that in it. There's stuff that like At Games has done and stuff like that where they just put it in there, but a lot of people are thinking, oh, Tempest on 2600 was terrible. But meanwhile, there's some programmer somewhere going like, I only spent 2 weeks on that as a proof of concept, and now they're saying it's a finished product or something. And it's like, it's not that at all. So that's that context we want to make sure we put around these things.
Sure. Unlike E.T., which actually was done in 4 weeks, but actually was put out. So,
yeah.
But speaking of which, not to jump the gun to the Atari 50th collection, but is any of Game Over footage in there? Remember?
There's no Game Over footage per se, but there's photos from that day.
Okay.
Because I was there, Chris Fuller was there. So it's going through kind of like personal archive stuff and we mention it and we talk about it, but we didn't get any footage from it.
Gotcha. No. I still have that. I still have that on my Xbox. I watch it every once in a while. It was really funny the first time I saw that. I'm like, shit, it's Myke. It's Mika.
I pop up everywhere.
I know, right? So, and this is what we were talking about earlier with the that preservation of the history and the box art and like even the TV show. Like this is the stuff I remember all this. So the only thing that was missing out of here were the movies.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to do anything with that because like I don't know why or anything like that, but we went for everything and we make do with what we get and what we're allowed to do.
Sure. That 1987 cartoon. I mean, I was still in my teens then.
Hey, Vanilla Ice did a great song.
Yes,
Power.
He did.
Yeah.
Well, and the guy who wrote Turtle Power. I mean, it was this one-hit wonder. But man, I have that. I have to go and get. I have sheet music for that. I actually have that. I will have to go over and get it when we have a minute. I actually have the sheet music for TRTL Powder.
I just like to imagine you as a little Myke at a piano at a recital doing Turtle Power.
So that's a story for another day. that may have happened actually.
I believe it.
I'm not kidding. I'm looking over at my sheet music to see if I can see it.
It's right behind that trophy you won for playing it.
Yes. This was cool. Like you even got let me back that up a quick second. You even got like official Konami the hell was it? I'm not even sure what that was. Wait a minute.
Advertisements?
No. It was some document. Hang on. Oh, here it is.
Oh yeah, so like the press kit letters
Yes.
and those things that went out. Yeah, all
Yeah.
the media materials, whatever we can get our hands on.
Wow.
This is where Charles was critical over at Konami because he was insistent on getting anything they had put into the collection, and he found with the team in Japan found a lot of stuff.
This was wild because I mean, by the time I got into this, everything was digital. They typed this out.
Yeah.
Like typewriter text. So, and this is where you first, if people didn't know, which back then I didn't know this until a few years ago, that Ultra Games was a subsidiary of Konami. So I didn't know that until a few years back. But this is the cool stuff that that these do, and it's I just loved watching it, and we did it again Friday night, just going through some of this stuff while we were talking. This is just it's so fascinating to see, and for people to see how advertisements were done back then. Like this is the stuff that then got printed in magazines.
Yep. And they would often come on slides. You get slides too. And so when you saw like boxes and stuff in magazines, it was because they sent slides out to them and you had to get them scanned.
All right, Qeorge, so nothing official. I don't think Myke can say anything about Night Stalker right now. I don't know, can you?
No, I can't really say much right now, but like just say like we're really intent on making sure people get to play it. That's for sure. So we're working on that.
There you go. So I still have the footage. It'll make its way back into the intro video when there's when it comes back in. But
what's interesting about that game is there's it's got a couple extra things to it. It's got a battle mode, 4-player battle mode, where you're fighting each other, and it kind of feels like Tron Deadly Disc a bit, but more like maze centric. It has we added things like bosses and all sorts of things, and we're really trying to do something where there's more of a story to it, because we're kind of trying to mess with people's minds a bit as to what Night Stalker is. And so when you saw that, even that early footage, you saw there was like a console that kind of reminded you of the Intellivision, and the thought there was that there's basically, I'm gonna get crazy on this stuff, but there's like a more or less like a dream state that's going on, as well as a real world state. And so we're having a lot of fun with what the differences of those two things were within that. So hopefully when we have something more to announce and we can go a little bit further with that, be able to see what we're talking about.
Awesome. Well, and because of my history with that game and in television and all that, when you are ready to talk about that, we definitely, those are that and any of the other type of games like that you guys might at Digital Eclipse might be looking to put out. We want to have you back on to talk about that. That's because Night Stalker's a big one for me. I don't know.
It was one of my. It was probably my favorite television game.
It was my
that's why
second.
We went so hard at it.
It was my second behind Astro Smash.
Yep.
Oh.
And the person who did the new Astro Smash works with us too, Nick Broody, who's fantastic.
Dude,
and,
so Nick and I are gonna have a conversation one day, because at the very least, I can at least say that I have played it. I can at least say there's I think we showed videos of it. I got videos of it when we went up to Pennsylvania last year for the Crayola Amico showing event. I got a chance to play it. In fact, he's not in the chat because he's out on vacation, but there's another good friend of mine, Chuck, DJC Game Studios. He does a great Amico show on Wednesday nights, and him and I are huge Astro Smash fans. And when Tommy brought the systems out to Pennsylvania, me, my son Seth, and Chuck were the first 3 people to play it, and I was awesome. I was blown away. So but when that time comes, I want to talk to Nick because I want to get in his head about how he brought Astro Smash to a modern audience. Because I will tell you, not only did I love it, but you can tell him my 12-year-old just went bonkers over it. I'm dead serious.
Absolutely, he'll
Seth
love to hear
went,
that. 'Cause
Seth went
he put
nuts over it.
a lot of effort into that. He and his teammate Rich on that one. I'm looking at the chat. I love that. Michael Garvey might as well be my brother from another mother because he mentioned Kolchak the Night Stalker, which is one of my favorite shows growing up. That's awesome. And then how much of it's completed so far is being asked, and I'd say we're probably about 25% of the way there when we stopped production on it. And but the tooling was all there it was easier then to do levels and additional work. So as far as like production time, we're probably about 40% of the way there when we stopped production for that time. And then there's another one here too, like there's another question. I already went off, but anyway, there we go.
See, never said Myke does not answer questions. He does. So we can. I think we've covered a lot about the turtle stuff. We can. Peter, Chris, anything else before we slide over to the Atari 50th? Because
Wow.
can't wait.
No,
for
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm just gonna go back and look to see if I saw any other questions from anybody.
Okay. Let me pull up because I do have. I don't. Is there anything other than the original trailer? I haven't seen anything recently from a footage.
I think they've just been doing some screenshots mostly at this point, and there's a big plan to do a little bit more sharing of what this is in the next weeks ahead here. So
okay,
but this is probably the latest to kind of bounce off of here.
Yeah, this was the celebration trailer, though. Which is great. Oh, there's that guy again. So how did you guys get involved with this project?
We had been talking a bit with Wade Rosen, who's the CEO of Atari, over the years here, and he's been phenomenal. He came in at a time with the Atari Old Guard when we had a project we wanted to do with Atari a while ago that was really awesome. We got a lot of people behind it. It was going to be something crazy with a lot of different developers throwing in, and it got so far, but then it got kind of killed by the previous CEO, who didn't really see the vision of it or anything like that, and so it was kind of frustrating. And Wade, who was on the board, he believed in the stuff we wanted to do. So ultimately, when he became CEO of Atari, the conversations heated up about what we would want to do, what would be our dream projects, like if we wanted to do stuff with Atari. And so Atari 50th, we had the 50th anniversary coming up, and it was just a really great moment to kind of reflect on, like, well, how do you treat the 50th? And you don't just do another collection. You don't just do, like, I think if we just came out with a collection that was Atari 2600 games and some arcade games, that's already been done. Code Mystics did a phenomenal job on the Flashback collections, and like, so why repeat that? So we came up with this idea of doing something that's a bit more than just a collection and go a little bit further. So we got really excited about the idea of, like, let's do some new interviews. Let's try to cover the history of Atari for the 50 years. Let's do games that haven't been done before that are in Atari's back catalog. Let's make new games. Let's focus on things. Let's complete things. Like, let's complete the Sword Quest series. Let's do all these things that are like Atari fans kind of like holy grails, and try to put them in one kind of project here. And let's celebrate what Atari is, and let's get some of our friends to come in on these interviews and discuss what that means. And so that meant also adding things like Atari Jaguar, Atari 7800, Atari 800 games that are really underserved, actually. I don't think Jaguar's ever been done on console before this. So trying to do all that sort of thing to help set it apart from what Flashback and those collections have done. And again, like, those were phenomenal collections. We use them as reference for a lot of stuff because there's so much work that was put into control remappings and how you handle certain things with certain games. So we refer to those as kind of like a reference manual for a lot of stuff. But what we ended up doing was going a different direction with this. And while we have a lot of those games that were in there, we've got a lot of games that aren't. And I know there was a question earlier, which you probably wrote down, was like Atari ST, which is what we intended to do when we went into this project, because we wanted to do a lot of Atari ST games in here, but we could not get access to enough games to justify the expense of emulating the Atari ST. It goes deeper than that, because it sounds like that's a cop-out, but really what happened was Atari didn't own a lot of the games that people remember on the Atari ST, so we had to try to track down, and even some of the Atari arcade games, the code was still potentially owned by another group, the game code, so we had to try to track that down. We were just running out of time trying to get it in there. Like, ideally, we can revisit that, because there's so many great games on the Atari ST, and we cover the Atari ST pretty extensively in here. We just couldn't get access to the games that people would have wanted on the Atari ST. And we got close. There's a couple that we really almost had included, but we just couldn't get the legal clearance for some of this stuff.
Which ones did you go after?
Well, we definitely went after Star Raiders, because that's something that should have been an Atari IP. It would close the loop on the other Star Raiders games in here. And that one we probably could have got in here, but we needed to have a few other games, again, to justify the expense of building that emulator. Right. So while we had that, we had a couple other, I think we had potentially Crystal Castles, which is well served already elsewhere in the collection.
Right.
So like when you're looking at all that, you're like, okay, well, do we want to spend all this money on this, which takes away from some of the other aspects of the collection, or do we just put the brakes on this for now and try to revisit that later? Maybe it's something we do later with a Atari ST focused sort of thing. But we love the Atari ST. It pains me whether people are like, "Whoa, why is there any ST games on here?" It's like, we tried, and we want to get ST games out there. So ultimately, I think if everything goes well, if this sells well, I think there's going to be ways to approach people who own the rights to those and have access to those games.
Well, one of the bigger issues with the ST as well was it was a majority of the games were third party. I played a lot. I played a lot of my gaming in my younger years was on the 800. So I started with an 800, and I have a funny story about this. I'll tell you how bulletproof that computer was. When I was a kid, I spilled orange juice on it, right? And it did the whole thing where the screen melted, right? And I'm like, oh no. I kid you not. After my father yelled at me for a good hour, we were like, all right, well, we got to throw it out anyway. Took it outside, sprayed it down completely with a hose and nozzle, let it dry, and I kid you not, the damn thing worked for another 5 years. I couldn't believe it. I ended up upgrading to a 1200 XL, and actually ran my first bulletin board system on it with a TASCII graphics and the whole 9 yards. This is going to be so nostalgic for me, Myke, because I had the 410, the acoustic modem, the 300 baud modem. I had a 1200 baud modem that I used to call, BBSs with, and I download. So I had my first copy of Castle Wolfenstein from. And it was so funny because back then, depending on how much you actually, use those yourselves, remember as you were downloading things and you saw the ASCII code running across the screen. Well, with the 300 baud acoustic modem, it was like this, and you
looked like somebody was typing it.
Yes,
putting every byte in for you.
And the minute that I got that 1200 baud modem, and of course I said what all kids say to their parents: if you get me this, I will never ask for another Hanukkah gift ever again. And man, the first time I went to go download something, and it was like, and I was like, oh my God, this is wonderful. That was such a great. I I had a disc drive with the Happy modification on it. I had the cassette
Oh,
player.
yeah.
I had the RS-232, the rectangular
That beige little box.
the beige box. It was such a wonderful system. The Atari 8-bit is why I'm glad the 5200 came out, so that people could see a lot of that stuff that I played. And Peter and I, there are games on the Commodore 64 that are on the Atari that him and I share a love of, like the Epix Summer and Winter Game Series, Blue Max.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, Racing Destruction Set, that was the first place I played Auto Duel.
Yeah.
There are so many games that I had on and still, like Action Biker, just all
The Mastertronic games, yeah, like Action Biker was great. That isometric motorcycle game. I played like Barbarian. I played all these like incredible games. They're so good.
I have the Action Biker like theme like plays in my head. Was a do 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 do.
I could not handle going up that ramp and going around that like upper roller coaster kind of like ramp of the upper thing. I'd fall off every single time.
And there was and eventually something was up there you needed.
Yeah, of course. It's frustrating, but I played it over and over.
It was hilariously fun. I mean, just there was so much on the computer system that I loved, and I did all the turtle graphics stuff. I had the pad, the drawing pad with the pen, the Koala pad. I was all in on the Atari. It was such an amazing system. So
I got an Atari later. I got a Mega ST, and also a phenomenal machine. Also with the MIDI and stuff. It's really when I got into that, and built in a SCSI hard drive. Also like put a 286 card on top of the processor so it could toggle between and still run DOS. It's like, man, that was like crazy.
You could trick that thing out so much, and there were so many great pieces of productivity software. Like, obviously, if you're into music, it was phenomenal for music. Like, there's some software on there I wish I still could have access to today because it was just so simple to create stuff with that. And same on the Amiga too, is the same thing. But like the Atari ST was basically what I love about that system is basically the people who made the Commodore 64 went on to work, at least some of them went on to work on the Atari ST. So you can see there's a lineage there. Like if the Amiga was the follow-up to Commodore, the real follow-up was the Atari ST because it was, even by the font, you can look at the font and realize, yeah, this is like a souped-up C64. And this is the real lineage, but it was an interesting crossover.
Yeah, but the 8-bit was where I was at for me. So how much of the 8-bit stuff, how much of the Atari 800 stuff do you have on this collection?
We definitely have we have some key titles in here because of clearly there's the Atari 5200, which had a lot of similar titles on it than the Atari 800, so we had to kind of like jump back and forth. Like for instance, Star Raiders is it was the same. It was on the 5200, but one thing that the 5200 had over the 800 was an analog interface, so it made the game more adaptable for consoles because we could map the analog to it, and it's a little more interesting for people now, and there's a lot of bug fixes and that sort of thing in the 5200 version. So while we celebrate the 800 version of it in the collection, we talk about it. The version we have in there is the Atari 5200 version. But then I'm trying to think of what I could give away. But if you look in the video, you see that there was like Miner 249er, for instance, which is on there. There's other 800 staples, but again, the stuff that I think a lot of people, when they think of their Atari 800, they'll think of stuff like Choplifter. They'll think of all these things that we just don't have access to for this because they're not Atari properties.
Right.
It wasn't for lack of trying to get some of that stuff, but it was just more or less this is going to be focused on a lot of those Atari games. So you'll see a lot of Atari 800 versions of Atari arcade games and that sort of thing in here.
And that's really cool. Well, and they were quite excellent. I mean, hold on, let me see if I can.
The other thing too that we have in here, I don't know if it's in any of these videos here, but like we celebrate the homebrew community as well. So we wanted to kind of address that. Like, people have gone on to do really incredible things on the Atari 800 and other systems, and so we do have some nice surprises there too. I think for people who think they understand what the Atari 800 can do, but later on somebody figured out how to make that thing do way beyond what you thought it could.
Oh gosh,
could do.
yes.
So wanted to include that as well.
Oh yeah. So you mentioned, which I know this was in. You said you finished Sword Quest.
Yeah, so Sword Quest is, as everybody knows, if you're an Atari fan, was intended to be 4 games. They got through 3, and they didn't start Airworld, which is the 4th.
Right.
And so what we wanted to do was basically close the loop on that. Why not do it after 50 years of Atari's existence? So for people who played through all those or really wanted to see what would happen if they carried on the story, that's included with this too. So that was one of the things we really wanted to address. And I don't want to go into too much detail about it, but for sure you see it in the trailer. Like we went after that and made sure that we could at least get that done.
Right. And the Jaguar games. So that is something that I know caught a lot of people's attention. And I had a Jaguar. I don't know, Chris, Peter, did you guys have a Jaguar?
No, I did not.
I did. And in fact, I had the CD drive too. I had no games for it, but man, did it have that great light show. It had that great screensaver. How did you guys, and I saw a tweet, so getting back to the emulators, I saw somebody tweet out that you guys wrote that emulator in-house.
Yes. So one of the guys we work with when we were looking at doing this project, genius Rich Whitehouse, who's amazing. He had all intentions to. He was already started work on a Jaguar emulator on his own, and so we worked out. We basically worked out a deal where we could commercially license that and help fund that project. And so we did that so we could use it in this collection, and we basically became partners on that emulator with him. And then he finished it up for this. And like the PS2, the Jaguar hardware is a really challenging system to emulate for all kinds of reasons. And I think the reason it hasn't been emulated extremely well to date, and there's an emulator out there that's really good, but I think a lot of it is the interest in the platform too, because I don't think it's not a Nintendo platform. It's not a Sega platform or anything like that. So I think a lot of emulator authors feel like if they're going to go that or put a lot of work into it, that there isn't a big enough audience. But you just see it here, like Peter and Chris they never had one, and I think there's a curiosity there with a lot of people to try out a Jaguar and try out these games that they've heard about or seen. This is an opportunity to do that. So we really doubled down on it, and we ended up doing a great job with this emulator. Rich really went above and beyond on it. So you see Atari Carts, you see Cybermore, Fight for Life. These games run great on it. And Atari Carts particularly is an interesting one because there's so much going on with how it draws the screen, and getting that to work right and getting Tempest 2000 to work right and everything like that was no small feat. And Rich pulled it off really well for this. And I can't wait for people to try these games out.
I can't wait.
Yeah, when the Jaguar came out, I was in the military. I was in tech school, Air Force, and I remember seeing it in the BX. And but living in the dorm, I was like, well, I don't really have room for this. I didn't think it was it came out. It was about $250, I guess, when it came out. So it was still kind of out of my price range, what I was making. So I ended up getting a Game Gear instead around that time.
Well, there's a lot more games for the Game Gear, and I know that Michael Garvey here is asking, is the old lady teacher commercial for Jaguar on this collection? She will ask you if you've done the math in this collection.
Excellent. I had forgotten about Fight for Life because, there were other great games that I'm sure you weren't able to get. Like drag into Bruce Lee's story because that's obviously, movie related. And of course, I know my brother 108 Dragons said no aliens versus Predator. I assume because
Yeah, the things where it's more complicated on the licensing side, that's a fight for another day for sure. Because now that we have the ability to do Jaguar games and we can do Jaguar CD, we can look at what we can do with those games. Like ideally, and there's been no conversations. This is just me spitballing right here, but like I would love to do like an Aliens collection or something like that, where maybe it has other Aliens games in it, and we put Aliens versus Predator in there from Jaguar and that sort of thing. Like we have all those kinds of opportunities that could someday happen, and we're just ready for it when that time comes.
That's awesome. See,
That'd be a
those are
good
the
one,
things that, yeah. I mean, and there are. I saw Tempest 2000 in there, and I saw Missile Command 3D. And if you can't say it, it's perfectly fine. But I didn't see in that list. I didn't see Defender 2000.
Which one? Defender 2000?
Yeah.
That one again. That's a Warner Brothers IP. Like I would love to put.
Oh, because of Midway, right?
Yeah, I would love to put that on there because I think Jeff Minter's games on the Jaguar are really, really. There's something really cool about those games, and Defender 2000 just like feels like it completes the Jeff Minter experience. If we didn't put the Virtual Light Machine and we didn't put Defender 2000 on there, ideally we could have had those in there to be like, here's the trifecta of Jeff Minter work on the system.
Yeah, it was such an like people were so focused on Tempest 2000, and I think they didn't. It's almost like Defender 2000 came a little too late because by that time, interest in the Jaguar was waning heavily, and Defender couldn't save it. But man, what a game that was! I mean,
oh yeah, it was really good, and I felt like but I always imagined his Revenge of the Mutant Camels, I think it was, on the Connex multi-system. So the Connex multi-system was this crazy game system where it had a seat and it had a screen on a rocking thing, and it was meant to come out like a long time ago. And the hardware for that, like Jeff Minter has seen in pictures of it everywhere. He was making this, maybe it was the Attack of the Mutant Camels or whatever the name of it was, but it was a Defender clone basically on that system, and it looked phenomenal. And I think the Mr. FPGA now is starting to emulate or simulate that platform, but I'm sure that game's on it. But what was cool about that is that like that hardware is very similar to the Atari Jaguar. The company that designed the Connex multi-system that eventually never came out went on to design the Atari Jaguar. So I think that put Jeff in a really great spot to understand that hardware and get moving really quick. That's why Tempest 2000 is such an excellent game on that system, and I think Defender 2000 benefited from a bit of that. If I'm just speculate, I'm sure that's kind of how it went down. Yeah. It's really kind of crazy. I nerd out about hardware and the evolution of this stuff, but when I think about the Jaguar, I really like the game that kind of sticks out to me is Tempest 2000.
Yep.
And obviously Aliens versus Predator and all those games are great. What's interesting about those is when you like, this kind of goes back to us saying that we say here a lot of times, and a lot of people now say is like you want the game you remember, not necessarily the game that it is. So it's like when you go to Aliens versus Predator, the frame rate is really slow on Jaguar. It's a low frame rate. Like, I don't know how bad it is, but maybe it's like 15 or 16 frames a second or something like that. And if we were to do something like that, what I would want to do is overclock it so that you get 30 to 60 frames a second out of it, so that you can play it how it should be played, or even the intent, because there's moments in that game where whatever the maximum frame rate that game is, I'd like to lock it at that and overclock to achieve that, so you can feel the game the way it was meant to be played. And so that's the kind of stuff, again, that's what we try to do with a lot of this stuff, where in this collection, for instance, there's a lot of games where we've done things like that to make sure that this game felt like the intent of that game, because some of them don't age well. And you can play it the real way, but you can also turn on this enhanced mode that will let you play it as intended if the hardware could pull it off.
Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. In fact, I don't. Well, there. I mean, there says, on the Atari site, when you talk about this, they do say best in class emulation, which obviously, and modern quality of life enhancements. But I didn't know that. I didn't realize that you were unlocking frame rates and whatnot. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
there's some games that are standout games for the Atari that we wanted to make sure had a little bit extra treatment to them, and you'll see more about that coming up soon. But what you saw in here is like the Yars Reimagined, where we reskinned Yars and we can flip back and forth between a modern interpretation of it and the original game. We do a little bit of that there too, because in Yars Revenge, when the fly moves around, it does a lot of it offsets in this kind of chunky way, and it's really great. And it's on Atari, it felt fine, but on a modern system blown up, it feels chunky. So what's interesting about that game is Howard, the way he engineered that game is that refined movement is in the code, and it's doing that, but the way it displays it is what's going on. So it does this thing where it draws half the screen, then draws the other half of the screen over 60 FPS. And so with all that information, when we do this new rendering of it, I was able to represent the Yar fly that you control with the actual data that's in RAM to make it move smoothly on the screen. And so you're getting like a better representation because what Howard had done under the hood was really refined, and then he did what he had to make it display on the Atari 2600. But if we just take that raw data and draw that in our own way, it just worked, and it worked really well, and it moved really well. It felt great, and it felt like that's what he was really trying to do under the hood. And so we represent that with that game, for instance.
It's amazing.
And Q4 can't come fast.
And when you're
enough.
playing, you have a button you can just switch to the original or not on the fly. So, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these are different from, which is great. So just so everybody is clear, the games that are on this collection, even your newer ones, are not the same as the recharged games that are coming out. Those are still totally separate games. So you're getting different experience here, even with, obviously I saw Breakout. I saw Asteroids. You can enjoy the recharge games, which I am, and still find everything you need in here. Like if you look carefully, like even where is it?
Where was that?
6 brand new games, but there's also, there it is.
Yep.
Damn it. I think people, it goes so quick, it's hard to. So that looks like Combat to me.
Yeah, that's one of the games I worked on. That's called Quadra Tank, and it's a 4-player combat. It has different modes, and it's not. It's more or less a throwback to the arcade Tank series. So Tank was an original Atari game. Then they came out with Ultra Tank, and they had Tank Plus, and all these different things. They had Combat on the Atari 2600. So this is like my synthesis of all those games. So it has a few modern things added to it. There's power-ups, and there's crates that you can blow up to get power-ups. There's things like missiles, lasers, rockets, all that kind of bounce shots and everything that are now more like power-ups rather than just discrete modes. And so that's one of the reimagined games. We have a sequel of sorts, or like a follow-up to Haunted House, which is Haunted Houses. We have one of my favorites on here, which is Vector Sector.
Oh, I just saw it.
Yeah, and then there's Neo Breakout, which is kind of like a whole different take on Breakout there. So these were interesting exercises. The reason we put these in here is we wanted to take concepts from 50 years of Atari and some of their standout kind of like their games, and also things that that really affected us, that were like personal things to us about Atari, and create new works around that just to include with this. So these were homages that the team individually kind of came up with to some of their favorite games from Atari as part of the celebration of what Atari is here. And we had the fortune of having a lot of Atari alumni come through, like Howard Scott Warshaw, Owen Rubin, and a lot of the arcade greats come through for this and do interviews. And we had a really great time with them and showing them these new games, and we got a lot of insights from them about these things. So like they even just by coming through and playing these games with us gave us a lot of great insights, and it affected the way these games turned out too. So it was really an amazing time. Like for days, we're having people who are heroes of ours just coming through the doors to do interviews for this. That it just like made this whole production something more of a magical thing for us.
Well, and since you mentioned the screenshots and stuff, so these are the things that we know about. I can't remember, what game is this?
What was that?
Which game is this?
That's Solaris.
Solaris.
So Solaris is a spiritual successor to Star Raiders as well by Doug Neubauer, who did Star Raiders, and they did this on the 2600, which is an amazing 2600 game. It's doing a lot on that hardware, and that's why like we're big fans of Star Raiders and that whole series. So we're really trying to get everything we could for Star Raiders in here.
Nice. Massel says, "Are any of us from Florida? We are not, but a few of our friends, including Brother Dreadpool, who's in the chat, is down there in that path." So
Yeah, good luck to everybody out there in Florida. That's crazy
it
how much
is.
it's been building up.
Yeah.
There's yours. And that's really cool. It's just so neat to see that kind of reimagining, kind of updating kind of thing. That is, what is that?
Asteroid 7800.
I never played Asteroid 7800. Huh.
It's a cool version. It's like part of what we had done here too is we're going through and just pulling things out that were interesting, because like I think everybody's played Asteroids Arcade 2600, which are also there, but we also wanted to show you different versions of things. So the 7800 was a really great addition here, because we could show some of the differences that went into these games versus the other versions. Like 7800's been great. Like Lynx, I wish we could have had more games for Lynx. We got a few choice selections for Lynx, but that's another one where licensing was really challenging.
Yes.
But it's represented.
I know this one. This is Food Fight.
Yeah, there's a lot of Food Fight fans, it turns out.
Yes, there are.
Excited. I think Atari's doing some new stuff with Food Fight, I think, or I thought I saw something online. Like, I would love to see a new Food Fight.
I thought that they were putting that on the reimagined list or the recharged list, but
yeah, I remember reading something
sure
about it. I hope they do, because like when working on this, it's been really fun playing it. The arcade version and like the home versions of it are pretty good.
Agreed. Oh, very much agreed. Boxing, but that's not the boxing I remember.
You remember Activision boxing, which was amazing. That top-down boxing.
Yes.
And you get that rhythm going. You get them against the ropes.
Oh yeah, and you just
combo
back
hit,
and forth.
bam, bam,
Yep.
bam, bam. It was so good.
I feel bad because like Chris and Peter are just sitting here like, I've never seen these before.
Yeah, we're just two old farts talking about it.
That's not Atari, right?
If I didn't play it on the 2600, then I didn't play it.
Yeah.
Well, I think this was 8-bit.
That's Real Sports Boxing for 2600. That came later.
Oh,
though.
that's
that was
Real
like,
Sport.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay.
87. By then, we already had a Nintendo, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's like, why do Atari at that point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in the
Well,
closet by then.
So I would argue, and we can have that argument. I would argue that there were some 7800 games that stood tall against the NES. I would argue that. Xevious was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that held down the 7800, which I never understood. I never understood this decision, was to simply throw the 2600 sound chip in there. I know why they did it. They wanted the backward compatibility with the 2600, but that to me probably was one of the two factors, other than just their timing, that drew people away from it. Because at that point, games that looked great but sounded like an old 2600 didn't fare well against the NES in that way.
Oh yeah, because by the time the 7800 actually came out, it was many years after its intended release, right? So
Yep.
it was meant to be well before the NES, and it just got shelved. And if anything, like by the time it came out, I don't think there was any desire to correct any of the design, or not correct, but to make some different decisions on the hardware, because at this point that would have cost way too much money for them. So it was just a shame that it came out as late as it did, because it did have some great versions of games. Like Donkey Kong on it is a great representation of Donkey Kong. There's some other bits
Rescue
there, like
on
Karateka and all these things that
Fractalus.
were really cool. Rescue on
Karateka was-
Fractalus, all that stuff.
Karateka was one. I mean, that was one of my those games. That Prince of Persia, those were the staples.
Yeah.
It's weird that they took the turn that they did, because I know a lot of the, I know part of it too was, I remember back in that day, the biggest kind of stick in the eye to the 5200 was it wasn't backward compatible, but with an adapter, the ColecoVision was, which I had a ColecoVision, which was also as phenomenal a system as you could get. I mean, the first time I played Zaxxon on it, the first time I played Venture, the first time I played Mr. Do, and even though Donkey Kong wasn't perfect, because it was missing that sixth girder,
Yep.
but Donkey Kong Jr. was as arcade perfect as you could get. I mean, just dead on. And so Atari, but the fact that you could play 2600 games on the ColecoVision, but you couldn't play them on the 5200 was kind of a problem. So
Yeah. And they came out with an adapter later. They had the 2600 adapter for it, but what you'll find out in this collection, there's a whole history to the development of the 5200, and there's a whole chunk of information and a video to watch that talks about the ups and downs of that development. And there's some surprising things that could have happened with the 5200 that just didn't.
Yep. No. And those are the things I'm looking forward to seeing in this collection, and seeing some of the interviews with Howard Scott Warshaw, and this is okay. So let me get to the technical piece of it, and let me grab something real quick. This is the part where I get up and go get something.
Let's get to the technical piece and just leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it
You're on
is
your
it stated anywhere how many games are included in this collection?
I don't know that it is, but there's
What's
just over 100. So
Jesus.
that was another complication too, where it's just like, oh, there's so many different control layouts, so many different ways to play these games, and so much work to make them a little more modern and that stuff. So it added up fast.
Bad.
All right. So I got up. Where did Chris go?
Bathroom break.
All right. So, as I said earlier, BCS. This is where I am buying this collection. I've got an Xbox Series X. I've got a PS5. But this is where I'm going to play it because of this controller right here. So, talk to us about getting the spinner controls working. Talk to us about the VCS port a little bit.
I mean, it's safe to say that for every platform we're using, we're trying to take advantage of the interface of each one. That even includes Xbox. There's some things we can do on Xbox that can't be done on other platforms and that sort of thing. So we are. When you look at the VCS, obviously the joystick supporting that entirely. Think about all the games you can use that for that you already do anyway. We're supporting it in a major way. We aren't. One thing we aren't doing is we're not putting additional games or doing that sort of thing. But I think the interface differences speak for themselves, because like that system was made to play Atari games, And so we've spent a bit of extra time on making sure that happens. And but then even, I mean, I don't want to give too much away here, but like maybe I can sneak this up a little bit. But even something like this is on other consoles too. Like paddle games have to be played with a paddle sometimes. So there's going to be ways to play these games that even on the other consoles are going to be interesting.
So you did give that away last time when we were talking about this month ago, and you popped into the chat. You did drop that little nugget on us. You dropped that breaking news. So I'm assuming that's going to be a separate accessory you could get, but don't necessarily need.
Exactly. And we are supporting everything we can to make sure that you can play these well. Because like obviously, if you don't have any of these extra bits, or you don't have access to any of it, we wanted to rework the game so that they can be played in a way that is natural for the controller. So for instance, there's a mode in Centipede where you're using the analog stick and it moves pretty fast, but it has to feel pretty accurate. But it's really tough because the range on trackball is so wide that you can go to a very small crawl to a wide arc and bring the player across the screen really quickly. And so we have a mode that you can use where it uses the analog to move around, but when you hold the fire button, it reduces the velocity of movement, because when we profiled the way people play Centipede, when they're shooting and they're holding the button down, they're actually doing it at a point that they're trying to be really accurate about their shots. So they actually slow down most of the time. And so we're like, well, we have a mode now where if you're playing with analog, you can get the sense of the full range. So whenever you hold down the button, velocity slows down. And so we presented that to people who were playing. They didn't even realize it was doing it, but they felt like they were playing the game a lot better, and they didn't know what was going on to make them get higher scores and play so much better. And the reality was, when you hold the button down, we're just reducing your velocity. So we did a lot of profiling of these games to figure out ways like that to make sure that when you're playing those games, they feel the way they should as you would be using a trackball. And so if you're using an analog stick on a standard controller, you're getting something that's probably as close as we can get to a trackball implementation.
Nice. Yeah, and that's something that'll also work on, say, a controller like this. Because the classic, the modern controller with the VCS is more or less an Xbox stick. Let's be honest. I've said that a couple of times, but this is not exactly analog. So
exactly. So we'll be able, like, we're paying extra attention to every single game, the way the input works, to try to adapt it as best we can for that. But then still leave the door open for people who have custom spinners or custom controls, especially if you have the PC version, which makes that even easier. We want to make sure that people who have those things can also interface with the game that way too.
Okay. And you can't do it with VCS, but is there any talk of online play of anything on the other platforms?
No, we held back on online here because there's just such a sheer number of games.
Sure.
And the games that would probably benefit the most from online would have been probably more reimagined games. But there's a couple of multiplayer games that would have been really good, but the budget and time that we had on this one, we're just like, it's probably better we hold back on that. It wouldn't have been as good as we wanted it to be.
Okay. And that's, that's fine. None of the recharge games I'm aware of are online either. So it's not like,
But the Vault and I think Flashback games have online as well. So it's like they did a bit of that. But for some of these newer games, people might want to play them online. So let's just see how it does. Like if this does well, if it even gets like half of the Turtles' success, then we're in a position to do more with this that can be very helpful.
Absolutely. Now, games that are there games because of the spinner capability of the VCS? Are there games that got readapted for the spinner that weren't originally? And cough cough Tempest 2000 cough cough.
Oh, so Tempest 2000, I don't remember where we settled on that, but it has a spinner mode. And if I recall correctly, The intent was to include that. I don't know if we did or not, and for what reasons. It wouldn't be a technical reason. I think it was more or less like the implementation of that versus analog implementation may have been almost identical anyway. So I'm not sure, but there was definitely we're looking into that. So if you have a spinner, say, and you want to play Jaguar or you want to play Tempest 2000, I think I don't want to say for sure, but I think we support that. We do.
Okay, that would be because that, I mean, as good as Tempest was, to be able to play it as intended, would make it even better. I mean, Tempest 4000 is just mindless fun being able to play it like that. And I honestly can't imagine playing Tempest 4000 on any other console at the moment that doesn't have this. It's the arcade experience, as best as it can be. So no, and Sean, I think I misunderstood Sean's question. No, every system will have the same content, Sean. Nothing's getting left out of the VCS version.
So VCS is going to have the same things that everybody else has, and I'd say the VCS gets the benefit of that joystick controller.
Yes, and that's why I'm buying it on the VCS, because of that. This joystick is the differentiator for me.
If you're bored, can you add drivers to VCS joystick? Trust me, we've had those conversations. We're like, oh, this would be great to put on every system.
Yeah, I don't think Sony and Microsoft are too keen on that. So, but now is this coming out on PC as well? Steam, anything like that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
So obviously with Steam, big block, I'm sure you could. So
yeah, I think we've. I don't know if it's in the product yet or whatever, but like I know we were able to get it to work on a PC. I think.
Nice. Yeah, I can't wait to see more. I mean, this is, and I can't wait for these guys to dig into. This.
I mean, like you said earlier, I missed out on so much. So.
Yeah, and what's great about it, you get the history with it too. The whole. That's.
Yeah, especially if we're hoping that people who didn't quite have the personal history with Atari will get a lot out of it, and so that was the approach. It's like, how do we? I think people who are fans of Atari know half the stuff that's in here. Hopefully, there's some stuff in here that will surprise some people. But for those who haven't grown up with these systems so much, or some of the later systems, that's really where it's at. Again, like Jaguar, I think is going to be really interesting to a lot of people, and the reaction's already been pretty good on that. So hopefully people start to appreciate Atari a bit more for where it is. And there's gaps, of course, in 50 years of Atari. So there's gaps here in the timeline where it's like, well, nothing really happened here. Like they were doing other stuff, or Hasbro had them for a little while or whatever. But we're trying to focus on the core history of Atari and what made Atari what it is. And there's some really great things that are said in some of the interviews that discuss that.
I'm gonna watch those. I love that kind of stuff. It's what I was so interested in. When I mentioned Atari Game Over earlier, like that was just so fascinating. To get people's perspectives on the crash and what they expected to find. So I'm kind of a history buff in that way. And on the Xbox, the history of the Xbox series that they did. We were all over that, and it was so wild. And of course, they had the museum and stuff on their site that showed all kinds of stuff. I tend to eat that stuff up, so I'm looking forward to seeing what stuff I don't know. But what else, Chris, Peter? I feel like I've monopolized this conversation with Myke, because obviously, again, him and I know the Atari platform probably better than most.
Yeah, I mean, that's just listening to y'all and just taking in everything. I mean, until I get my hands on this, there's going to be a lot that I've forgotten. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this. Because like I said, once we got an NES, Atari 2600 went in the closet. But
as with a lot of other people, I remember I had one that I sold so I could put money towards an NES, and I regretted it right away and convinced my friend to give it back. Here, I'll pay for it to get back.
But I was talking to my mom because she's going to be moving, so she has a storage, and I might have a box with the the Atari 2600 NES and so on that hopefully I can get hands on, and then do a little bit of unboxing, a little like a time capsule type thing here one day. But one of the things about the Atari 2600, me and my brother, so my grandfather had it. We didn't even know he had it, and then one day he's like, "Here you go, you can have this." Like, okay. And your main games, the ones that were on arcades, being able to play them at home was great for us, and just repeat, trying to get as far as we can the score. One of the funny moments that I had, we were playing the I think it was 10-yard fight, and I realized that I could put on the back, I could switch it to turbo to player one. My brother didn't know that. He just couldn't understand how my player was faster than his. So, once he found out, that was it. I was in trouble. But we had a lot of good moments on the Atari, and so I do definitely love that this is coming out, and I can revisit some of those and experience many other Atari games that I missed out on. So.
And Peter, were you a Commodore guy?
Yeah, I was a Commodore 64 for the longest time, and then after that I got the Atari Mega ST, and then 486, and then I didn't get back to consoles till the OG Xbox.
Nice.
So
I was a Commodore 64 guy. So my neighbor, our neighborhood was basically set up where I had the Commodore 64, my friend had the Atari 800, and my other friend had the Apple II. So it was just like, that was our...
Oh, nice.
Those were our fiefdoms. And so everybody would come to my house to play Commodore. We'd go over to my friend's house to play Atari 800. And I learned how to program the Commodore 64. It was just an amazing, amazing device. And again, it sounds like you followed kind of the audio path, because C64 audio was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The Mega ST, which is amazing audio.
Yeah.
And going up to 46. But man, there was so many great games on the C64 that I was just thinking about, because as the Halloween holiday comes around, I'm like, I could just do a Halloween style game on the Commodore 64, from like Cauldron, which is Cauldron something Strikes Back, which is the pumpkin that you're bouncing around as, to Monster Mash, and all these crazy games that were on there. I don't know what the total number is on the C64, but it's like in the thousands of the games that were on that platform. And not unlike the Atari 800, which at the end it tallies up pretty high too. But it's just ridiculous, the sheer number of games that were on these platforms back then.
Yeah, like everybody around me when I was growing up had a Commodore 64, so it's like...
Yeah, that was the computer.
That was the
one.
See, that made me sad when I used to walk into. I used to walk into Games and Gadgets, and I used to look at the little section of Atari, and then the other entire wall was Commodore. Yeah. I was like, damn,
I remember the first time I heard digital speech on the Commodore 64 was, I remember SAM, which was that speech synthesis program that I would sit there and I thought was amazing, because whatever I typed it would say, but it would say it so horribly. And then we would sit there and prank call places, but it didn't dawn on me as a kid that they didn't understand anything this thing was saying on the other line. It just sounded like gibberish, right? So we thought we're so smart, doing dumb sayings and asking people questions. They're just like, what? But that was really cool. But once I started hearing digital audio, Ghostbusters, where it would say Ghostbusters in the title screen, or my favorite, which was Impossible Mission, where it starts off with the stay a while, stay forever, and I think that it was just unbelievable moments of technological advancement that was happening on those machines. And the C64 in particular had just some killer audio at the time that I just hadn't heard or didn't think a device could do. I remember my dad called me downstairs one time where our computer was, and he was playing this thing on the C64, but it was his Billy Idol's Flesh for Fantasy song that was looping with it was all digital audio, but they broke it up so that it sounded like the song. And it sounded like it was coming out of a stereo, but it was all him singing, all stuff, and the electric guitar and everything going. And I thought he was pulling a prank on me because it was like, all right, what's going on here? And it's like, no, it was just this file he loaded that just did it. It was awesome stuff.
Yeah, I remember, like, getting some of those from the demo scene where they ripped a whole bunch of songs, and I put like a tape recorder in front of my TV and recorded all the songs, so I had them on tape. And it's just
they would rip all those great game songs, Rob Hubbard and what's the other guy? Ben. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I can't believe I'm remembering him. But all those songs that were in these great games, I would do the same thing. I would record the audio and just listen to them in my like Sony Walkman. And when I went back to my parents like years ago, I found a shoebox full of all those cassettes. It was just all Commodore 64 music.
Still had them. That's awesome.
I was amazed once one of the videos that I did was doing the RetroArch emulation, how that worked on the VCS, and I did a couple of Commodore 64 games for Peter because I know he loves it. So I did like Summer Games 2 and Blue Max, and I was not a Commodore guy. I was the Atari guy. Well, my friends had Commodores, but I don't remember how they sounded because we played them on little TVs. To hear what the Commodore 64 could do audibly was amazing. And I will say that no matter what I thought of, the Atari versus Commodore bit, the Commodore blew the Atari 8-bit out of the water when it came to audio. It was no contest. It was so good. And Ghostbusters was a great example. The Atari version of Ghostbusters did not have the synthesized voice in the theme song. But the C64
it was really crazy. And learning how to program on the Commodore 64 was pretty amazing too, because there were so many resources. And on the Atari 800, like Compute Gazette was like a magazine that would like publish like listings and it would teach you how to do game sprites and how to do audio and all stuff. And so
that's how I learned how to type, by just typing in those listings. It's like
exactly, because like you had to sit there and if you were, I'd say like what made me learn how to type with those listings was that I wanted to type it in so fast that like I had to get good at typing because I was impatient. I wanted to play the game that was in there, but I didn't want to take the 3 hours or whatever it took me to type it. So I got really good at typing these things really fast. And I'd get friends over who would just like, we had like a shorthand speech where it's like, we knew how to say what the character set was. And there it's like print quote, home or whatever, but you started having all these different words for things. And you knew that meant control this or shift that. So it was really amazing.
That is,
and just thinking about it, I remember my favorite was like Hawkmen of Dindrin was this game I typed in. Or to this day, I remember that name for some dumb reason. And it was just like a game I played over and over. It's like this shooter from Compute Magazine.
And that's what got you into what you're doing now, right? That's what inspired you.
Pretty much, because I would start learning how to hack those games. Like I would change lines or do different things. And I'd figure out how to change the graphics. Then eventually I just started making my own games and I would sell them at the local computer store. I remember I ride my dirt bike up to the store and the guy who would my dad would drop me off sometimes for a whole day there too, where this guy Larry Berman ran this store called Soft House Computer Center, and he let me sell software on the shelf there. So I would just like print labels up. I'd like try to do all this fancy stuff and everything like that, and I would sell them there for like $2 or something like that, whatever it was. And I was just happy if like any game sold. I suspect sometimes with some of the worst things I did, I suspect he just pretended like they sold and just gave me money. Probably just threw them away. But that's how I kind of learned, because I felt like I had an audience and I just wanted to keep making games and doing that. And he was great because he kind of showed me how to do things the real way. I may have talked about it before, but like my first game that I wrote in machine language, I did it because I had a disk sector editor where you could look at the contents of a disk and it just throw up a whole bunch of characters. And I reverse engineered that, and I realized like I could change colors, I could do things like that. And I started to learn how to code by just writing to the disk sectors, which is the worst way to do any game ever because it takes forever. But I like deciphered that. And I thought I was really smart, and I showed Larry over at Soft House Computer Center. I showed him how I did. He's like, "How'd you make this game?" And it was like this frog game I made, and I showed him how I did it, and he was so appalled by the method that he gave me like this really expensive suite of software and just gave it to me. He's like, please take this $130 worth of software and learn how to use this, because like you're making me like sick just knowing that this is what you're doing. And like I went home and I'm looking at stuff like, oh my God, I can make a game a week with this. So it was great.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, my parents were not into computers at all. And we really didn't have the money. I mean, maybe I'm sure my dad, if he was, he would have spent the money. But I wish, always looking at retail magazines and advertisements, like, man, I wish I could, I mean, my only the Apple II at school, I had to type in the code for jump and run, that I was fascinated with that, but I just never got that at home. And like someone in chat said, Mike Garvey said, oh, I wish I had, Mike's one of those guys, I wish I could have gone to his house. He had everything. And I had a buddy named Fred that he had everything, every system, everything you came in, so that's where I got to get my taste for a lot of the other things, what I had. So
yeah, like my parents weren't necessarily into computers so much, except for when we would go shopping. Like we went to Kmart, the department store Kmart, and they had a computer section, and so they would take hours shopping. So I actually first started learning how to program things because they had in their book section like how to make arcade games for the Commodore 64. So I went over there, I grabbed that, and I would sit there for hours while they were shopping and like learn how to do some of the stuff on their demo model of the C64. And then one time my dad came back and I showed him kind of this rudimentary Boom Patrol game I had made. And he's like, did you do that? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, And then like a week later, we had a Commodore 64. I don't know how he got the money, but I think he was looking at it going like, this guy, like he can make the family money if he keeps doing this. But that's kind of how it was. But the Apple II, like I would stay in on recess because they had one Apple II and they would wheel around on a cart to the different classes. So my friend and I would stay in on recess so we could have exclusive access to it. And I remember one of the first games we did there was this this game where you're like jumping over hurdles, and if you touch a hurdle, your head would explode. And I remember showing our teacher. Our teacher was kind of disturbed by it, but also kind of like impressed. She was like, "Well, that's interesting. Can you like take away the gore?" Those were good times, though. Really good times. And I saw in the chat, Big Block Plymouth 00 mentioned there's nothing like a good double ender, and that's the Zonox double enders for the Atari 2600. Which I don't know if you guys remember these or heard of these, but it's two cartridges put together, so you'd flip it over. So one side was one game, and you flip it over, and there's another game on the other side. And my favorite Zonox cartridge was Spike's Peak and Ghost Manor. So there's like this haunted house where you play these kids trying to like get rid of Dracula, I think, in the haunted house. You go up against ghosts and stuff. And then there was the other side was Spike's Peak, I believe, which you're climbing Spike's Peak. There's another one that had like Sir Lancelot, and you mentioned Chuck Norris, which was another weird game for the Atari. But those were like, I felt like that was the best deal ever, because I remember going to Toys R Us and it's like a double ender for the same price as a regular game. And it's like, I get two games for the price of one. Yeah. And they weren't that bad. They were pretty good games.
This should bring you back. I just found this.
Oh,
Commodore 64 type-in program book.
See, I have so many of these. I've got books up on my shelf over here of all this stuff. I remember the Commodore 64 memory map, which was just this book, spiral bound, that just told you every memory address and what it did. And so I would just go through that, and I would just like learn everything. Like, how do I change colors of this? How do I put sprites up? It was so good.
Mostly disappointing is you buy a book or whatever from a store, and you type in the listing and it doesn't work.
Oh yeah,
you just do typographic errors and all that stuff. So it's like, again, so you have to fix it. And it was,
I don't know if you guys ever see that MAD magazine that had a computer listing in it one month?
No.
And it was a type-in program. Okay, MAD magazine. This is why they were brilliant. The humorous magazine, MAD magazine. They had 1 month celebrating computers. They had listings for the Atari 800, the Commodore 64, the Apple II. And what it did is they showed imagery of like this really high-res looking image of Alfred E. Newman, their mascot character. And so I sat there. These listings were gigantic. So we typed in everything, we did whatever. And no matter what, we couldn't get it to run. It turns out that was the April Fool's issue, and it was just a bunch of gibberish they put in there. So all these idiots all across the world are like typing in these programs, like, "Why isn't this working?" And it's just like a big joke.
Oh, dirty.
It was the ultimate troll, and I respect that.
Was it this? Oh, it was this one. Hang on.
There you go.
Yep, I do remember this. You had right. Let me
There
see
they
if it-
are. There's things like.
Hold
Trying
on,
to
let
get
me
these
see
to
if
work.
it'll.
And the thing is, they almost worked. So there was just a little bit of work you had to do to get them to actually do it. I think they did like the next issue, or maybe an issue later, where they fixed it up so you could actually do it.
Yep. Okay, rotate your eyeballs and go to line 500. What was the name of the game you were talking about? The shooter?
The type-in game, Hawkmen of Dindrin, Dindrin, I think.
There it is.
Yep, there it is.
Hawkmen of
That's the
Dindrin.
book I had, the C64 Games book, Spiral Bound. There it is.
Ah,
I thought that was the coolest thing.
oh wow, you could actually hang on. You could actually
Play it on there.
I don't know. It's that or in real time I'm going to be malware.
We can sit here and type it in if we need to. There's I think that same book had Diamond Drop, which was kind of like Kaboom, and or Avalanche really. That was the Atari version of that. And yeah, there's just so many interesting things. And like later on, I had a magazine called Run Magazine that was a Commodore magazine, and I learned how to do like character redefinitions where I could use a character set like tiles to animate like a guy running. And just recently I looked back at that, and the author who was writing for that magazine that wrote that thing that taught me so much about character sets or whatever was Orson Scott Card, the guy who wrote Ender's Game, the novel. Like he was writing Commodore 64 code for this magazine for years during all that.
I know.
It's kind of funny you bring up authors and stuff. My daughter, she had a homework assignment, and it was about authors and stuff. And it's like, and it's like, well, do you write? Yes, I write. I write code. I'm a software engineer. I write like enterprise applications because my graphics capabilities is lacking. So that's why I'm not making games. So I was basically telling her like how to write code and other stuff like an author would write a book. So I guess we'll find out how our homework assignment went. But
in many ways, it's very similar. I mean, the way you structure it's an awkward approach, but like it's true. Like I would sit there and think about people who wrote these listings like book authors, and I would see the same person who wrote this one game over here, wrote another one for this other magazine, wrote for another magazine. Pretty wild.
All right, let's
type in Godzilla game for the C64.
Oh,
that's cool.
I remember doing stuff out of Analog magazine and Antic.
Oh yeah, Analog. That's right.
Yep, and there were those kind of the Snake game and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
There was Ski, and I had so I had the regular Atari DOS. And then I had Sparta DOS, which was my favorite. I would like to find some pictures here.
So, Myke, your kids, are they into gaming as far as making games?
Not so much, although my son came in and helped out a lot on the Atari 50th. So he on it, and him and Jimmy Williams' son, who's one of the other engineers on this project. We brought in our families to do a lot of QA on this because it's still tough to get people in office during the pandemic and all stuff. So it was almost easier just to be like, let's bring in our families, play the heck out of this game and everything like that. But we got some really incredible bugs out of that crew, even more so than our traditional QA, which was awesome. So there's a little bit of hope that they might follow the family business. But my daughter, more or less, she's going down the path I originally went down, which she wants to make movies. So she's really hardcore into screenwriting and she wants to be a director someday and all that kind of stuff. So she spends a lot of time thinking about that and playing around with like making little movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my oldest, she went to school thinking she was going to get into gaming and as far as art. And she learned real quickly. It's like, nope, this ain't for me. No.
Yeah.
A lot harder than she thought. So.
Yeah, it's like my son. He took some computer engineering classes and he got pretty far with it, but then he decided like that's not his thing. He'd rather play them than make them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although Seth is going to be, he wants very badly to be a creator of some sort. Although I think he's going to end up being a graphic designer. I've never seen a 12-year-old who's got a command of Blender like he does. Like he spends his days drawing just recreating images from Hello Neighbor. And
that's amazing. Like Blender is like something that like the kids know how to use really well.
Yeah.
Like that's something my son like came home one day from like 6th grade and he had like this 15-minute sequence of a car chase that he did, all the rendering and animation, all that stuff in Blender. And I'm like, what?
It's nuts. And he's got like the attention of folks from Tiny Build. I mean, some of the designers, like they're sending him messages and talking to him on Discord, and I'm like, when did this happen? So he wants to get involved, and I think he's got a career, in design.
That's great.
Which is fantastic for him as an autistic child. He can hone in on that. He could create some really beautiful graphics.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm going to work on harnessing that with him because some of the stuff that he's done is just amazing and well beyond my capabilities. So I enjoy playing the games too.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I've asked my youngest if she was interested in coding, and like, nope, I just want to play. All right.
Yeah. So looking down at the clock, and I say this all the time. Peter laughs at me. I'm like, this is gonna be a shorter show because how much are we going to talk about? But as usual, it's 11:42. So I know it's we've definitely encroached on Mike's dinner time. So I did want to. There was something that I wanted to ask you about. We kind of talked about it a little bit at the very, very beginning. I wanted to get your take just really quickly on and Peter and Chris's take on what E3 announced for next year. I saw what they want to do, which is kind of a hybrid of the way it used to be with the way it is now. And I wonder if that's going to bring anybody back that hasn't been there in a while, and what it means. So E3 next year is June 13th through 16th. So it's still in June, so I haven't brought it back to May. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. But the first 2 days are just business, and I'm assuming that also means press. Third day is a hybrid business consumer day. Well, they'll let both in. And then the fourth day is purely consumer. That's intriguing to me, because I think when they stopped making it a trade show is when I thought it was going to die. And it was, let's be honest, it's hanging by a thread. So, I was there for 10 years. Myke, you've been there for a long, long time. What's your thoughts on this? And are you guys is that gonna bring you there next year?
We're game. Like, honestly, E3 to me meant a lot. I mean, we were there for some of the biggest moments in gaming, but it was a different time. It was a different world, essentially, because now, like, how much more is done outside of a trade show? It's really changed, because like you would go back then where all the buyers around the world would come to that show to make orders for stuff for the holidays and going to the next year. So they would go there, they get wined and dined and wooed. That's why we had gigantic parties and everything else. It was just really about an industry that had too much money and trying to win over people in the almost pre-internet era. Because even when the internet was early, it still was too hard to make deals and do all that stuff. Now we have like virtual meetings for work, like where people aren't even coming into work anymore. So the thought of like flying a lot of people to LA for commerce and trade in this industry, I think that's a challenging proposition for a lot of people now. Back in the day, it made a lot of sense. So it still has that kind of issue, but I think what we're going to see is like we still need a gathering place. And while there's shows like Gamescom and others, it is important to get people together and at least have meetings in one central area where you can meet with a large number of people and a large swath of people. I don't know. Like I think gone are the days of the extravagance of that show, which like it's almost mythic when you think back on it. Like,
oh God,
it was just ridiculous.
The 1999 Sega hangar party.
Yeah.
With Peter Moore hanging off the trestle. We're gonna kick PlayStation's ass. I will never forget that moment. But those are the moments that made that show special for those of us who covered it, because we, you're right. We got wined and dined. We got,
That's the thing is like, you think about like magazines at the time, like magazines were important. Now it's like online, and it's not necessarily traditional journalism anymore. It's like it's shows like this and everything else. So it's like there's the consumption model for promotion and all that stuff is so drastically different that a singular physical place can't quite contribute to the level it used to before. So that's the only thing that bothers me about it, or not bothers me, but concerns me about it. Like, will we go? Yes, we're going to go. We'll love to have a presence there. Like, are we chasing what E3 used to be? Probably, because it's probably not going to have the impact it used to have. But at the same time, it is that gathering place. Now, we've seen it over the years. Like, Microsoft carved out their space that's away from the show floor. Sony was like one of the last standing ones for a while and then started to pull back. Nintendo was just kind of, okay, we'll do something here, but we'll save all the good stuff for a later event. And that's going to be the hard part, right? Because it's going to be hard to get everybody to come back and play nice together in one space. I don't know that that's going to happen. Like, if we can go back to Microsoft and PlayStation and Nintendo being these giant booths in one big space or whatever, sure. Like, I think people will gravitate towards that. But right now, Nintendo's doing great with their Nintendo Direct, and Sony's doing great with theirs, and Microsoft's doing great with theirs. So I don't know that they can justify the expense to go that far. Now, making it a consumer show as well as a trade show, consumer shows have done great. So that is an important part. But when you mix them together, like in the same time, I think that was another problem, because when I was going to E3 in those last few shows where I needed to get work done and have meetings, I couldn't even like walk through the crowds. And it was like really challenging with that. So I think that's a good idea. I hope it can come back, and I hope it gets big again. I hope people start realizing that like sharing space again is a good thing, even with the pandemic and everything like that. Like, I think there's value to that. We learn it when we play games. Like, if we could all be in a room right now together playing a game on a console like we used to when we were kids, that's a better thing. It always is. It's just like, but the realities of the world now change that.
Right. Well,
But this one has Reed Pop, who does PAX, and PAX has been very done well. PAX East, South, West, and PAX South is here in my town, so I was fortunate to go to 6 of them.
That's great.
And so they do a combination of where consumers and developers can come and meet face to face and talk about the games they're making. But you also had that, I think they had at least one day or so many hours before they opened to the rest of the public was the press time.
Yeah.
And so they did a good balance there. And believe that's what they're trying to do here.
I think PAX is the best example of
Yeah.
a show that can survive all this, because they kind of like they evolved with everybody else, whereas E3 just under its previous ownership or whatever, really failed to see where things were going. So I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm just like, I don't know how far. I guess what I'm looking at is like, I don't know if it can reclaim its past, but it's going to be good.
Yeah, I think if it, like PAX, where, you're not going to get everything and everybody there. You might get what's current at the time, like somebody that wants to show off. And I think, if E3 do that, like, and you may not have all of Nintendo, but you might have a booth there of certain games that are popular, right? They want to show off, you might get that. Yeah. But, and a combination of, but I don't think it'll ever go back to what it was, because some of it's going to be digital, along with whatever they're doing there on the floor. So,
well, in a lot of the blockbuster game announcements have already been made, right? I mean, we just saw, for example, we just saw Modern Warfare's latest thing. Like, the money thing, which Myke, you and I tend to agree on. Why? Microsoft can do it because they're doing it kind of in their own theater, right? So they take the Microsoft theater across the street. I'm sure they get a little discount for using that space. They're not on the show floor, and so they're not paying it was millions of dollars for some of these. I mean, we all saw how extravagant the Microsoft, the Sony booth, the Nintendo area, Activision's booth was always pretty cool. Even like I remember the Gizmondo booth, right? With the DJ and then the stuff. THQ always had a great looking booth. I mean, these guys spent a ton of money to be out there, but you don't have to do that anymore. And it's the money that I think that keeps people from really going full force. And why should Sony spend $20 million on their E3 presence when they don't need to? They just need to put out a state of play that shows God of War Ragnarok, and they're good to go. Microsoft has fan shows. They don't need to have a fan show at E3. They can have a fan show anytime they want. It isn't like the old days. And I mean, I remember the old days of it was hard enough to play games as it was. I really never hit the show floor at all. I spent every waking moment in a press meeting with a PR rep. So I mean, I got to see a bunch of stuff behind the scenes, but I never got to, most of the stuff we saw behind the scenes we weren't allowed to touch. So we were watching somebody else play it or watching some pre-recorded video or something like that. So it was rare that I got out onto the show floor to actually play things. I can't imagine
the last E3 I went to, it was bizarre because you're walking through and there's nothing that was really, even though it was like a consumer, like it was a consumer day, a lot of the games weren't outward facing. They still had their private booths. So you tried to find where the games that were playable were.
That's weird. No, I want to see E3 succeed because I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends, think of E3 as the Super Bowl of gaming, which I don't see it as that anymore. But there's a lot of people who like to go and to your point, Myke, it's a meeting area. So if he's still in the chat, 108 Dragons TV, he got his tickets for next year because he knows there's a bunch of people that are in the community that are going to be there that he gets to see and hang out with. So from that perspective, there was always that coolness of us, flying out and hitting the floor. I as I reminisce, where's display capture? I got to go out and write about it. Right. So, this was my old site and we went and I spent many years at the Microsoft press conference. I became really good friends with Peter Moore. A lot of my guys got really tight in with Nintendo, and we were always invited to all to conferences, and all that was really cool. I just didn't see it like that in recent years, and I had always said I probably got one more in me. I've got one more E3 in me before I'm truly done. But and maybe this is a step in that right direction. I don't know, because while this is great, Sony still has to show up. Microsoft still has to show up on the floor. Nintendo has to show up on the floor. Third parties have got to be there. EA has got to come back. I mean, in order for this to be a meaningful show and not just an indie show or a small, where Konami shows the one game it's working on, and the other one is, of course, your Cowabunga collection. It's in order for it to really recapture some of that magic, the companies have to show back up. And that's the challenge I think E3 has, and they put on a brave face. But if they can't get the publishers to come back, how long does it really go?
Yeah, everybody's just got to see value in doing this again, and I think there's a desire for it to come back. I think there's enough people who've been in this industry long enough that are still in positions at these companies to kind of be nostalgic about what it used to be. And I think it's hard to connect the dots though. Like, does that actually equate to, pushing the business forward? I don't know. It's a tough one. Again, like companies like Sony and stuff probably spent upwards of $20 to $25 million, if not more, to do a show like this, and that's like the budget for a pretty decent game. So it's like that might make them more money to do that or do a remaster with that or something than having a presence at this show.
Yeah,
I don't think we'll ever see that again. But I think with Repop being in charge of what they've done with PAX, they've been able to bring not, a small part of what these publishers want to show. If this E3 can be somewhat successful and they see something promising, I'd like to see Repop take it on the road and do what they do with PAX South. And because the name itself, E3, like you said, is nostalgic. It has a lot of weight to it. And then people are like, oh, E3 is going to be somewhere close to me. I'm going to go. Exactly. And so if they could do what they're doing with PAX, with E3, I think you can spread that out. You're going to have a mix of the big publishers and the small one. A lot of indie games can be there. You're going to have board games and so on, a mix. It's not just going to be what it used to be anymore. I don't think it's going to be what PAX is.
If PAX is the DC of game conventions, then E3 is the Marvel, right? So
it could be, yeah.
No, Peter, what do you think, man? You don't pay as much attention. Your big thing's always just, get the game out in my hands. But
yeah, well, true. But I mean, for fans, I mean, it's just a nice gathering, like, same as PAX. And before, game developers, publishers, perhaps they like to meet and mingle with each other. I don't know. But what you said, Myke, it's like it's not really where business will be conducted anymore. And
it's like business now is conducted whenever, and
whenever
you don't have to have a destination.
Yeah. And the media is not the same either. It's podcasts like us, influencers, streamers.
Mm-hmm.
So E3 needs to find a way to use that. What is trending? Who's popular on YouTube and so on? if they can track them there and then bring some of that audience, some people in person, some people digital to the engagement numbers, either in person or online, will help E3.
Yeah. But if you look at certain communities like the Sea of Thieves community with Rare, they care more about how many people view their game on Twitch than actually play it. And it's more the engagement that way versus like actually hands-on the game engagement. So I don't know.
All right.
Times have changed.
They have. And that's just it. It's like we have to change with them. And so if E3 is really, they're using the name and it's like a brand on top of like a souped up PAX, that's probably a good thing. It's just that we have to put our expectations in check on what that is. Because if people are thinking like this E3 is back, it's not necessarily that E3 is back. It's like, yeah, by name, but it's gonna be what it needs to be now. If it's handled right, it's gonna be what the show is supposed to be now. Yeah, which is not what it used to be.
Right. Yeah.
Look at G4. They try to make a comeback. I don't. It's just not, what it used to be. And
that's a great example. That's really good you brought that up. Yeah. Because I was gonna say like G4. There was Ven before that. Do you guys remember that? Like an attempt at doing like a G4 style show or network. That I think where they both failed, and it wasn't their fault, but where they both failed is that they're trying to. When we watch both of those, they're trying to do YouTube style content on a network, and it's like why? Because now it's scheduled, whereas on YouTube you just go and consume it when you want to. So it was just like trying to be what it wasn't with a delivery service that isn't modern to the way people like to consume that information. So it was just a hard problem to solve for them. Like I think people like the idea of G4 coming back, but they couldn't just do traditional G4 content. So they tried to be like YouTube, but they can't do that because that's not the same kind of thing. So I think it was just a crazy experiment that didn't quite get the lift they were hoping for. And there's layoffs, of course, now going on, I think, which is unfortunate. But I was also excited about G4. I wanted to see kind of a return to that, but that's not really what the world wants now at all. So I think we're seeing that.
That's a big part of it. We are. It sucks, but we are. What's the term they use? We are built differently. The demographics today are so different that it's difficult to do the same content. And G4 I think they lost that to me. Trying to watch, first off, doing it online only. Streaming is great, but streaming is not all there yet. There's still a lot of people that have Xfinity, that have DirecTV, that watch things terrestrially. Even throwing something on Hulu would have been a great idea for them. So you shrink your sample size to start, and then the demographic that's online, you think until you start putting stuff out there, and then you realize when it's too late, okay, I totally misread the room. And it's based on what they used to do versus what they were doing now. And I think I watched 5 minutes of the new Attack of the Show, and I'm like, nope, this isn't it.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
And that's the shame.
Yeah. But like Keely's the one that he's been able to put something together. Like at Gamescom was kind of a big deal for him because he had a live audience while we were all able to watch it live with them too. So if E3 can find someone who has that kind of presence, like Keely, that would help them too. But
I think the Keely ship has sailed. But
with E3, unless they work something out. But
and right now in the industry, I don't know who has that. I don't know who has that that star power. I mean, you know, take away everybody's opinion about Jeff's, you know, implicit biases and whatnot. You cannot deny his power in the industry right now, and you can't deny that he has built something. He has built his brand in the industry that people want to be around. The Game Awards, I cannot believe they've come to where they are today. And then, you know, he provides, and over the last 2 years, provided a healthy alternative to E3 with the Summer Games Show and Summer Games Fest. So, I mean, he's a force to be reckoned with, and that's also that you gotta take that into account too, because people are gonna be on whatever platform he's going to put together, because you know he's gonna do something that's gonna be away from E3. So,
well, gentlemen, my time is up.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
No. I can't believe I did this. I swear I said this was going to be a shorter show, and damn it. But so no, thank you. With that, I'm going to get us all out of here. Myke, thank you so much.
Oh, this has been really fun. Let's do it more often. And thanks to everybody in the chat too. It's been really interesting seeing the questions and the things that people are interested in here.
Yeah,
we have a great chat, great group of friends in chat that every week they always show up and participate with our topics. So.
Yeah, they're such good people, and yeah, we will definitely not, because once the Atari 50 comes out, and we start getting our hands on it, then we got to talk, because there's gonna be so much content, and then
I want to walk you through some of the things in there and our decisions on some things, so that'll be fun.
Okay, so all right, so we will work on that. And everybody, obviously, you can find him on Twitter, at Digital Eclipse. You know, you see him, pick up any gaming show, and you'll see his face somewhere. So, thank you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and get us out of here. Peter, Chris, another great showdown. Thank you, chat.
Thank you, Mike.
We will
guys. Appreciate
see everybody next Tuesday night at 9:30 p.m. for another NLG show. Don't forget to check out all of our great Gamers United Guild channels down in the description below. And as always, folks, play on, gamers.
Game on.